They buried me in the water and I came out new. Now I'm baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue.
Welcome to the Officer Autumn podcast, the only podcast designed specifically for female cops in mind. I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. If you love the music, go check out One Time Music. He's a fellow Leo. You can check him out in the show notes. And his full song, Baptized in Blue, is at the end of this episode. Tom, I'm so excited to have you here. Can you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes, my name is Tom Walsh. I'm currently working for Street Cop Training as an instructor and doing administrative work here in the offices. And I am a retired police officer of 26 years, worked for a municipal police agency here in the state of New Jersey.
Amazing. And so what are you teaching at Street Cop?
Oh, Street Cop, I'm teaching a class titled Rookie to Retirement. And it's really like a navigational course, if you would, on how to survive the class from the very first days as a rookie all the way to retirement, so that you're set up, that you take certain steps along the way, so that you're set up so that when you're eligible to retire, you can do so on your terms. And I talk about it in the class. Basically, the whole thought of it was, on my very first day, it was as a full-time police officer in my agency. It was Christmas Eve in 1996, and an old salty sergeant looked at me and he saw me sitting there before the briefing, and he took a Polaroid picture of me because, I'm aging myself, but that's what we had back then for taking mug shots or Polaroid cameras. He took it and he looked at the picture and he shook it and he threw it at me as I was sitting in the chair. And he said, "Sport." And he called everybody sport. This was a salty old sergeant. He's the type of guy that even called the chief sport. I mean, he'd been a long time. He'd been there longer than everybody else. Nobody screwed with this guy. He was an old jarhead. Everybody respected him, and everybody feared him, quite frankly. And he threw that Polaroid picture at me, and I bobbled it around, and I looked at it, and he said, "Sport, hold on to that picture, because you're going to be surprised how quick 25 years goes by." And he was right. And I say that in the class. He was 100% right. However, I spent the next 3 or 4 years with him, and he did not mentor me. He did not give me a lot of guidance or mentorship. And for 4 years, as he was my sergeant, there was a lot more wisdom he could have imparted on me. I ran into a lot of great mentors along the way. But I said, after talking to somebody else who pitched this idea of the class to me, I thought, if I had 8 hours with myself on that day now, after spending 26 years in law enforcement, what would I tell myself about life, about this career, about surviving it? What are the things I would talk to myself for 6 or 7 hours in a class? And that's kind of really the impetus of the class, Rookie to Retirement.
I love that. Now, Tom, were you only a patrol officer your whole career?
No, I rose through the ranks, and for the last 6 years, I was the chief of police at my agency.
Wow. So what was that like?
It was quite different. In a lot of ways, it was beneficial. It gave me a lot of freedom. It gave me the ability to do things I wanted to do for my agency and for my people. But in a lot of ways, it was there were some drawbacks. I talk about this in my class also. Like in the beginning, I show a photograph of myself in a white shirt. And that really, I don't like the photograph, because not only does that shirt add 10 or 15 pounds, and for somebody that struggled with their weight for their whole life, that's not good. Also, whenever you ate Chinese food or Italian food, it was inevitably get on that shirt. And you can't rub it in like on a dark blue or a French blue shirt. But truly, it really separated me too much from my men and women in law enforcement. I felt like in some regards, I know this wasn't true, but I felt almost like a glorified secretary in a sense. Like I missed the work, I mean, I loved being a cop. So in that way, it was a drawback. You weren't actually answering calls anymore. You weren't in the field doing what you really get into this work for. But the rewarding part was really helping my agency, giving my officers what they needed, having empathy for them, being a role model and a leader, and mentoring them along so that when I left, they were ready to fill those roles.
That's important. And Did you have any like women on your PD, or did you have an opportunity to mentor any women?
Yeah, absolutely. My agency was a smaller municipal agency, but it was on the Jersey Shore, where we would hire a lot of additional help in the summer season. And some of those people that were great workers, we would keep them on year round. And there certainly were a good amount of females that we brought on for the summer seasonal part. There was also somebody that we had on a full-time capacity that came to me and was having an extremely hard time getting into law enforcement as a female, specifically even in my agency before I got into the position of being the chief of police. And it was an interesting in the fact that, she had went to college. She had planned on entering a field of law enforcement or criminal justice field. And then she wound up getting married and life happened and she never got into the field. After she had children and they were slightly older and on their more independent, she wanted to enter the field. And unfortunately, in New Jersey, there's a rule that once you hit a certain age, you cannot become a full-time officer. However, we do have that ability to hire these seasonal level officers. And there's something called a Class 2 officer, which is very close to all requirements of a full-time police officer. It's just shy of a couple classes. You carry a firearm. You go through basically the entire academy class like a regular police officer. And I was able to get her to join the force as the lower level. That's what she wanted, to be the Class 2 officer. I was able to get her to do the Class 1, say, hey, this is what everybody has to do. I realize you're a very respected person in the community. I realize you have your stuff together and your drive and your desire to do this, but everybody has to start off as a Class 1 here. And that means, standing out, doing some real grunt work, standing out in the heat, directing traffic, doing the lowest level stuff, packing cones up, putting cones out. And this was a person that wasn't going to be doing it for the money. These people get paid extremely poorly, the seasonal help. And it's also, she was around her peers, other women in the community that had children that were well off, didn't need the money. And she did it. She went through the police academy. She did everything we've asked of her. And she was an outstanding employee, and we brought her on to the next level, and she did that. And if I had the opportunity to have hired her as a full-time police officer for my agency, I would have. Unfortunately, like I said, the age requirement, she had just surpassed the age requirement, and there's nothing you could do about that. And fortunately for her, there are some places in New Jersey that you can get hired, universities and colleges for one, because they're outside that pension system. And she got a full-time job in a local university as a police officer, and she's thriving there. She's doing well. I keep in contact with her, and there's no doubt that she was a role model for other women to get into law enforcement, and women that already were.
Can we just talk about that age thing? Like, what are we doing? What's going on? Like, what is the age requirement? Like, what is that? Like, how? Like, what's the number?
The number is 35 in the state of New Jersey. And the reason why is that at a certain age, you have to age out here in New Jersey. It's 65. So they, I think that the thought process behind it is that they don't want people, you have to have a certain amount of time in the pension system to become vested and to be awarded that pension. And they want to cut it off at 65. They don't want older officers. That's my take on why that originally was set up. It's been there since before I became a police officer here. It's been in effect for quite a long time. It's an administrative code. And I believe it has to do with that, and I go over that in the Class 2 about retiring when you're eligible here in New Jersey. People can typically retire with 25 years of service. There's no age requirement at this time, but certainly a lot of states around the country are moving to age requirements. They keep bumping it up though. And it's unfortunate because officers already have a much lower life expectancy, due to the shift work, the stress, the sedentary lifestyle. There's a lot of reasons for it. But New Jersey, at least for a lot of things they get wrong, they get right, that they do want officers leaving at 65. And it just coincides with the amount of time you need to put into the pension system.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I have a hard time with that though, because I'm going to tell you why. Like, I definitely agree. 65, like we do not need 65-year-olds on the road. Like we do not. If you're 65, please get the fuck off this job, get out. It doesn't matter. But the thing is like, and I say this from a girl who started her career at 20 years old. Okay. 20, I was young. I didn't know anything, but like, I don't I'd take a 35. I'd take a 36-year-old officer. I mean, that's a person who's lived a lot of life and I bet would be really good on the streets. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sucks. But we're going to move on from that. So tell me, so as a chief, so here's the thing, Tom, we have a lot of women listening to this. And I want to hear from you, just, your experience of working in your department, working on the Jersey Shore. Did you ever meet Snooki? Like, that is what I want to know.
No, I never had the pleasure.
But the thing is that like, it's different for us, and I'm not pulling the female card. You and I've had long conversations about this. What did you see, like, in a way that you felt like, did you see anything that you felt like as a chief, or just you saw like officers could do to assist and better support the females? Did you ever see anything like that?
Well, I just think inherently all minorities have a much harder time with the job. It's historically been a male-dominated workforce. And as much as we try to get the police forces to reflect the citizens that they serve and the communities that they serve, it's a tough road. Law enforcement as a profession is difficult to begin with. It's tough. It's hard. That. You have to be squared away. You have to have your shit together. And being a minority is just it presents a host of different obstacles, depending on what your minority is, depending on your agency, depending on the culture of the community you're serving. So yeah, there's a lot of additional hurdles. And I think that because of that, I think it draws minorities, whether you're talking African-American, Hispanic, Asian, Jewish, female, I think it's drawing the strongest people from those communities to join. Because it's already a very difficult career. And some people are delusional, they don't get it, but it is, regardless of who you are entering the profession. But being a minority, including and especially women, it presents additional obstacles for them. It's just tougher. It's tougher to get into the field. People think maybe you're not as strong. There's these old mindsets, not as strong, not as smart, but people are evolving. I'd like to think police departments, police departments are historically slow to take on change, period. They just are. It's like, it's a quasi-military organization. They're very structured, very hard to bring on change. But I think that it's changing. I think more and more administrators, the ones that I've rubbed elbows with in my 6 years of being a chief of police, understand the need to reflect the community, have empathy for other people, see strengths in these people and what they can bring to their organizations, And I think, I have a different perspective. My father passed away when I was very young. I was raised by a strong woman. She was one of three girls. So I had two strong aunts. My father had a sister. So I was surrounded by very strong, successful women. So that's my perspective. And I think that helped me to have a lot of clarity on how much women can bring to, policing, among other things, of course. So yeah, I think that as people and administrators really evolve, like I said, I think they're acknowledging the old school mindset of, this was a knuckle dragging. You had to be the enforcers of crime and of, enforcers, and almost like, you were looking, there had to be height requirements, weight requirements. They had to be a certain height. Where today the whole profession has evolved, right? I mean, just in the short time that I've left, I've only been gone from my agency in 1 year, or I'll just use an example. Like I said, when I became the glorified secretary in some regards as the chief of police, if you asked me to go back out to the patrol car and now do a simple task, even to write a summons, the technological advancements in just those 5 or 6 years, I was lost. And these younger officers, really took to it. They would have to mentor me through a lot of the different computer systems and the technology, license plate readers, the body cameras, how they worked, how they had to redact information. It's just a rapidly moving profession like everything else, especially with technology. So for a long time, I think police departments were resistant as a culture, and now they're playing catch up, and they're doing it very rapidly.
And so, do you have any, what would you say to a woman who says, okay, Tom, like I want to get into police work. What do I do? Like, where do I start?
Well, I think it's very state specific. I think you have to find out where and how. New Jersey is pretty quirky. There's about 3 or 4 different avenues and ways that you can get into policing. There's civil service departments. There's departments that are not civil service. Like I said, there are these seasonal police officers that once they go through the academy, then can go through like a expedited waiver program where they go back for 2 weeks and then they get their full certification. So I think it's very state specific for actually applying and becoming a police officer. I think the best thing to do in regard to that would be find a police officer. Find a police officer and have a conversation. If you don't know one, if you don't have one as a friend or family member, approach one at a Wawa or at, I say Wawa, I'm a Jersey guy, but, at a convenience store, what have you, Quick Check, 7-Eleven, at whatever your local convenience store, approach one and have a conversation, or go to your local police department and say, hey, is there someone on here that would have 5 or 10 minutes for a conversation? And I think you'd be surprised that people would be willing to have a great lengthy conversation on how to get your foot in the door.
That's good. And what about as qualities, do you see, are there like certain qualities that you think like administrators are looking for in women, or do you think it's just in police officers in general?
I think it's police officers in general. Really, I think it is. That was always the way I approached it. And there were times when I would even hear from the mayor or commissioners like, hey, we're going to be hiring officers, but it would be nice to have this type officer on the police force. That those things are absolutely said either overtly or covertly to law enforcement administrators. And I would never dig my heels in or have a lengthy conversation with them about it. I would say, okay, very good. And then when I was in charge of hiring people, I would tell my officers that were doing the interviewing and doing the background checks, hey, listen, we're looking for the best applicant for the job. That's the bottom line. I don't put a color, a sexual orientation, anything on it. I want the best officers. Give me the best candidates. Run them all through the same interview process, the background process, and give me the best candidates. They have to be squared away and they need to have their stuff together, quite frankly. And that, so I don't. We were never in the market for selecting a certain person because of this or that. And we weren't excluding anyone because of anything.
And what would you say would be a best candidate? Break it down for me. Like the people that are listening, they're going to want to know. They want to embody those traits. They want to embody that, whether they have them naturally or they have to go work on them. I get messages all the time. Like, what makes a great police officer? What are administrators looking for? What are police departments looking for? So could you break that down for me? What would be great qualities? Male or female, doesn't matter, just for an officer.
Yeah, well, when you're trying to break into law enforcement and when you're in the initial stages of exploring it, putting in applications, doing interviews, I think there's a couple critical things you need to do. For one, you need to be very cognizant that every interaction that you have with the police department, there are notes being taken, either whether they're being physically written down or they're up here and they're mentally being passed on to someone else. A lot of times I saw people coming into the police department, I didn't actually see them. But they would come in, they would have a very laissez-faire attitude. They would come in with, big white sunglasses and men with double earrings in and talking too low, not being dressed appropriate. And these little notations would be marked down when they were picking up an application. So I think the first thing you need to do is realize that it's not just the interview when you're dealing with these police departments. They would see that the car was parked sideways in a parking spot out there, had all tinted out front windows, which is illegal in New Jersey. And these little notations would be made. And, these little things make a difference because you're talking about a profession where you need to pay attention to detail. Mm-hmm. So that's something I think is important to know. Like once you're starting to start this process, at all times, be dressed appropriately, act appropriately, eye contact. If you don't have great eye contact, practice it in a mirror, a firm handshake. It can be very intimidating for anyone, not just a female, but anybody that is not a law enforcement officer to walk into a police station and have somebody in a uniform come out and have a conversation with you. It can be intimidating. And that's not even saying getting to the point of having an interview with 3 or 4 of these people sitting across the table trying to shake you because they're intentionally trying to see how you are under pressure. Just that first initial couple contacts, picking up an application, dropping an application off, a very preliminary precursor type interview can be intimidating. So just know that if you have to look in the mirror and practice how you stand, how you look, look at other police officers, how they carry themselves, and think about that and try to portray that.
What do you think's like some obvious disqualifiers?
Obvious disqualifiers that are like official ones. And again, this is, every particular agency and state have their own disqualifiers. And you can usually find these very easily on their website or in the application packet itself. But, of course, criminal charges, DWIs in many cases, they are all automatic disqualifiers. These things are usually statutorily set up or in the guidelines or the standard operating procedures of the agency. And you usually can find those out. But ones that are automatic disqualifiers that are like kind of hidden or unofficial, for those, I would say somebody that's just way too timid, somebody that you have during the background, a lot of people talk badly about them. You have somebody that just won't look you in the eyes. And, it's very specific on certain individual people that are actually in the process interviewing you. People that stick out for one way or another. They're too overbearing, or they're too aggressive during the interview, or they're too back. I mean, you want to blend. You want to seem extremely confident, but not overconfident, if that makes sense. I mean, you want to kind of, if you were in the police academy, you would understand this. You don't want to be the person that sticks out in any way. You want to look as uniform as possible. You don't want to be the person that's volunteering too much is almost as bad as like trying to, be meek and not hold yourself correctly. So you want to look like you have your stuff together. You want to be confident. You want to be strong, but you don't want to be shaken easily. And you don't want to stand out for any reason. That could be
That's
taken
huge right there. That's fucking huge. Yeah. That was really good, because the thing is like, as women, we already stand out. We do. Like, we're not.
Oh, absolutely.
We just do. And so this really coincides with everything I say. Is like, okay, listen. And like, Tom, I know this isn't like your expertise, but I always say, I'm like, listen, you can wear a little bit of makeup, but let's not look fucking airbrushed. Like, let's not look like a supermodel. Let's like put our hair back. Things that make like resemble you already to be that officer. Because would you agree with me or disagree? Tell me the truth. But like, when you have an officer coming in for, let's say, their oral board, right? The officers, would you say that it's true or false that the agencies want to visualize what the officer is going to look like, what the person is going to look like as an officer? If like they can visualize this person as an officer, then you're probably going to pass the oral board. Yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, they're, like I said, they're constantly watching you and judging you and thinking, how would you reflect this agency when you're wearing that uniform on duty and when you're off duty? Like what, they're going to get into your social media. They're going to look at how you carry yourself as a person, what you're doing on duty, what you're doing in your off duty behavior. Thinking about in the future, how are you going to represent their agency? So yeah, 100%. They're thinking about what you're going to look like in a uniform, how you're going to conduct yourself. 100% truthful.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say that, that's a large part of the interview process itself. And many times it's not the actual questions they're asking, it's how you're answering them. They don't expect somebody on an interview to know how to handle specific calls or scenarios that they put you through, but they want to make sure that you're confident. They want to make sure that you're not shaken because they're trying to get a rise out of you. So there are a lot of things outside the realm of just the questions themselves. The answers sometimes are not as important as how strong you stand in your convictions of what you're doing, how you answer it, how long it takes you. Are you indecisive? And they don't want a police officer that's going to be indecisive.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of things.
And like, P.S., girls, listen up. We tend to be a little more indecisive. So we gotta, we really gotta work on that. And I think, in my opinion, that really comes from confidence. And I believe that confidence is an inner thing. I know that because I'm not naturally I'm not a confident person, but people will come to me and be like, oh my gosh, Autumn, like you come off really confident. But the thing is I've worked at it. I've worked at it constantly. And so in my opinion, yeah, like if you're going to be sure of yourself, you're going to be confident. And if you're confident, then you're going to be able to be more decisive. You're in making your decisions. You're not going to be like, oh, maybe, I don't know. Like, and that's huge. And that, wouldn't you agree, that will go into the category of like timidness, right? Like if somebody can't make a decision, we're not looking at them like, oh yeah, right there, that person's confident. We're more like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to look negatively upon you, sure. And I think it's important also for women to realize too, when they go into these interviews, there's so many different cultures of agencies, and it'd be good to get a heads up and know, hey, is this going to be a more professional type interview, or is this an agency that's going to have a board and they're going to try to like do an interview that's going to rattle you? And sometimes agencies will do multiple interviews and they have different purposes for each phase. And, if, hey, you get, there's, there are interviews that every single person, regardless of who they are, come out thinking they bombed the interview. And the purpose of those interviews are to really rattle you. And sometimes it's not a lot. Sometimes it's just to get a little bit of a rise out of you, or to get you tripped up, or to make you second guess yourself. So, it's hard for all candidates to really walk away from those interviews and feel like, hey, I'm doing terrible. Maybe I should throw my hat in. I'm not going to do this anymore. Throw in the towel rather. But I think it's important to realize that that's the purpose of those interviews. And just because you walk out of that, maybe you don't get hired by that agency, don't give up, because there are interviews out there and the purpose is to really try to get a rise out of you or to trip you up.
When you agree that like right now is a perfect time to want to get into police work because everyone's hiring.
Yeah. It's an interesting time. It ebbs and it flows. And right now everyone is hiring. And it's a time when it's a difficult time for people to make the decision that they want to go into law enforcement, and people always say, oh, what would you want for your own children? And of course, like I would want my kids to make their own decision on what they want to do in their life. And it's difficult. When I would go around to school children to read books for Read Across America or what have you, as the chief of police, you want what's best for these individual children, but deep down, also that like, policing needs good people. I want good people attracted to this career. I don't want to deter people from entering a career in law enforcement. It was very fulfilling for me. It's a very challenging career. And like I said, there are ebbs and flows. After 9/11, police officers could do no wrong. Then you cycle it back around to the George Floyd incident and other high profile incidents of things that go wrong and uprising, and then the defund movement. And that ball gets rolling, and now police can do no right. They're judged, they're looked down upon. People dump water on them in public and video this and put it on social media. And who wants to go into that profession? No. It's a very difficult time. But like I said, the pendulum will swing back again. I'm confident of it. Like I said, it can be an extremely challenging career and an extremely rewarding career.
Mm. I totally agree. Now, so Tom, how's retirement?
Oh, retirement is great. It is good. I mean, my wife will say I'm working harder now some days than when I was the chief of police, but it's a different type of work. It's just completely different. I'm enjoying the change. I was working at a great agency. I love the people. I love the job, but just financially it made sense for me to walk away. It made sense for me to just start a new chapter. 26 years of doing something. I was looking for something different, a different challenge. So I found it here at Street Cop Training. I'm enjoying my time here. And it gives me the opportunity to still be working kind of in the field. I'm still dealing with law enforcement officers, which I feel very comfortable with, and helping mentoring them with different classes, bringing them on here. It's another role that I have. It's an administrative role. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
I love that. Now, would you give us, as we wrap up, could you give us some like rookie to retirement advice? Give us advice to leave us with.
Rookie to retirement advice. If you're young and you're getting into this field, the number one thing that I recommend, and it's regardless of whether you're getting into law enforcement or you decide not to get into law enforcement, is invest financially, even a small amount. There are a lot of different investment vehicles out there, Roth IRAs, deferred compensation plans. I go through this in the class. There were two mentors I ran across in my career when I was very young, fortunate enough to tell me that. I didn't understand compounding interest. I didn't understand how important it was. And I did not put a lot of money into these things. When I first started my Roth IRA, the $2,000 was the maximum amount you could put in annually. And when it came time to retire, that money was sitting there for me in the Roth IRA, which I can't touch till I'm 62 and a half. But the deferred comp was there for me. And I said, if I didn't put those little bits amount, I'm talking small amount of money. If I hadn't put that in there, it would have been left on the bar floor, at the clubs, bought some toys that I didn't need or would have forgot about by now. I would, whenever I would get a raise or a bump in pay, I would increase it a tiny little bit. I would still pay myself. I would still get my money, but I would put a tiny little bit in there. So yeah, that would be one thing. And just from the financial standpoint, and retirement isn't all about financial. It's really about a lot of other things. And the other thing that I would just give is just don't become so immersed in the law enforcement culture that it takes over your life. Because I've seen a lot of people, it becomes their identity. They lose their friends and their family members that are outside law enforcement. And at the end, when they do retire, they don't have really much left. So keep hobbies, keep friends outside law enforcement. Those things are critically important.
So good. Thank you so much for this. This is really good. It's really nice to get a perspective of a chief of police, especially we have a lot of women going into the job, looking to get into the job. So you provide a lot of good stuff, as well as for my female officers who need to come take your class, Rookie to Retirement, because we all need to be squared away. So happy to be able to spread your gospel, Tom. And everybody who wants to sign up for your class, they can just go to where?
They can go to the Street Cop Training website, streetcoptraining.com. Right from there, there's right on the homepage, there's a roster of all the great classes that we offer. Scroll down to the Rookie Retirement. You click on that button or any of the buttons of the classes that you want to, and it'll bring you to a specific page where it shows all the locations that class is coming. And if it's not coming to you, many of the classes are now available on demand. And if you take it on demand, along with the cost of admission to on demand, you will be allowed to then also take it in person if it comes to your area at any time.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Tom. We'll see you next
Autumn.
time.
Thank you.
They buried me in the water and I came, I knew. Now I'm baptized in blue. I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. They buried me in the water in the Holy Ghost. I came out with a badge and gun and a heart that said never run. I signed up for a job you wouldn't dare to do. This ain't no green screen movie, don't compare the two. We look at your actions in the elements and everything relevant. If they line up, prepare to pay the consequence. You do dirt, you get cussed, no bluff. It's ignorant to think we will shoot with your hands up if you the police. You feel the world is against you, like every call you go to, people trying to tempt you. Well, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary. I ride on the devil, I ain't scary, and I ain't worried. You want my life, come take it, it's gonna be a fight. I take you to the light, like Will and Bright. I wouldn't expect you to understand what I do, only the thin blue line, cause they baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I can't explain the pain when I see a name on the wall. All I feel is rage, put me in a cage, let me brawl. Sometimes I can't help but cry, like why did he die? I know it was him, but it could have been I. What about the kids? What about the spouse? Yeah, now who gon' put food inside them babies' mouth? It's a bigger picture when the officer down. Domino effect, Blue Nation, family, country, and town. The media don't cover us. Well, maybe Fox, cause MSNBC and CNN surely don't care about cops. Politicians more concerned about protecting the legal instead of laying the law down and protecting the people. Let me get off my soapbox before I curse. I don't seen way too many cops riding in hearse. Well, I wouldn't expect you to understand what I do, only the thin blue line, cause they baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. If I'm faced with a mission, I'm gonna complete it. If that means being deleted, I live with the credence. I do this for the combat vets and Leos. When I'm suited, ready to go, it's either friend or foe. Only Lord knows what my future's in store. I only kill with the hope to see more, so God don't close that door. If I take a life, it's him or me, with the hopes to survive, not bigotry. I go in situations that you cannot imagine, deal with things that you cannot fathom. No if buts or rather, I'd rather fight for a cause than live for nothing. So when you read my headstone, you know I died for something. You hypersensitive shit complain by justified force. You blame the cops first, that don't work, you blame the courts. But I wouldn't expect you to understand what I do, only the thin blue line, cause they baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue.